Karma is one of those teachings that's hard to relate to sometimes, both intellectually and emotionally. Intellectually because it's related to the issue of conviction. You hear the word conviction, or even worse, the translation is faith sometimes. We think that we're being asked to commit to something that we're not really sure about, that we don't have any means of knowing. But that's not what conviction means in the Buddhist teachings. It means you're going to take something on as a working hypothesis. You're committed to the sense that you're going to really try to test it. But now you're not being forced to give your emotional assent to say yes, when despite my lack of evidence, I say this must be true. You say, I'm going to try it out. It makes sense. It's asking me to believe that my actions matter and that I have the choice in my actions. They'll give results. But I'm free enough to learn from past mistakes so I don't have to keep repeating the same mistakes over and over again. Emotionally, it's hard to relate to a teaching that seems to be aimed at explaining why people are miserable and blaming them for their misery. That's never how the Buddha taught it, though. When he first introduced the topic of karma, he talked about generosity and gratitude, the good things in life, our ability to share makes sense and is valuable because of the teaching on karma, the part that says we have free will and that actions bear results, and it's important to think about the results. Back in the time of the Buddha, there was an issue around whether generosity really was worthwhile. It came from those many, many centuries of the Brahmins saying that generosity is good when given to the Brahmins. People would react. Part of the reaction came in the teaching that people didn't have any free will, so when someone gave something to someone else, it didn't really mean anything. The other was the teaching on annihilation. When you die, you just go out and that's it. So what we do for one another really doesn't matter because we're all going to die in the end, which is a miserable way of looking at life. So the Buddha is saying that generosity is worthwhile, that it's real. He's saying, one, that we have freedom of choice to be generous or not. In fact, that's our first experience of free will. As little children, we have something in our hands, and we could use it for ourselves, but then we decide, no, give it to somebody else. There's a pleasure in giving to somebody else. The Buddha wants you to encourage that habit, encourage that thought. And also the idea that helping other people is really worthwhile. That people don't just end with death, that there's something that goes on, there's a process that goes on. And if you can help that process, you're helping something that could have long-term benefits, and your process will have long-term benefits as well. So the teaching on karma is not so much about punishments, it's about opportunities. Try to learn to relate to it in that way, that we have the opportunity with our actions to create a much better life for ourselves, now and on into future lifetimes. The sacrifices we do for other people don't go to waste. The goodness that other people have done for us is something really worthy of gratitude, because after all, they had freedom of choice. And all the good qualities of character that we develop through the practice. It's not just concentration and discernment. We practice endurance, renunciation, equanimity, determination, qualities of the will. when you make up your mind that there's something you really want, and you try to get all your random desires. The Thai images of trying to catch crabs and put them in a basket. You get one crab in the basket, and by the time you've got the second crab, the first crab is beginning to crawl out. That's where minds normally are. We're trying to bring some order to that. And we have to develop qualities of the character in order to keep our random desires from running away from us, or running away with us. And this is a sense of well-being that comes with that development of character, a sense of your own worth. Now, this is a healthy sense of ego. We see so many people talking about how little children need to develop a sense of self-esteem, and they try to give it to them by giving them rewards, overpraising them. That's not what self-esteem comes from. It comes from knowing that you can be helpful, and that you can say no to certain things that you know are beneath you. There's a sense of happiness that comes from that sense of well-being. Because all too often in modern society we're taught to look for happiness in sensory experiences, to be on the consuming end of things. We get more and more we get defined as consumers. Even discussions, say, of global warming come down to, what are you consuming? As if people were measured by their consumption. But you consume pleasures, and then where are they? They're gone. And John Swett would often say, those sensual pleasures you had last week, where are they now? They're just a memory. Not necessarily good memory at that. Sometimes you might be thinking about how much you miss that particular pleasure, or you begin to realize you did certain unskillful things in order to get it, or you did unskillful things under the influence of the pleasure. So those kinds of pleasures are not always happy. It's not a very satisfying kind of happiness. The happiness that comes, however, from knowing that you've developed a skill, and you've benefited from yourself in a way that doesn't harm anybody, and sometimes in ways that benefit other people. That's a really solid sense of self-worth, and there's a sense of happiness that goes with that. So when you think about happiness in light of the teaching on karma, we have to learn how to think strategically. We can't simply go by, I want this, I want that right now. And it's good for us. We know that psychologically people who just follow their whims are not very happy. It's people who can channel their desires in a direction that they find worthwhile. Those are the ones who are really happy. And the teaching on karma encourages that. In terms of the practices, as you focus on the practice, you may not be able to get all the way in this lifetime, but it's not wasted. You can pick up. In the practice, you create the conditions for being able to pick it up after you die. So lots of ways you can learn how to get a better emotional relationship to the teaching on karma, because it's really going to sustain you. And John Swett would talk about how people who follow a life of sensual pleasures, when the time comes when they're about to leave this life of sensual pleasures, they look back and all they can have is regret and fear and grasping, because there's nothing of any substance there in the memories of past pleasures. Of course, you know what happens to people's memories as they get older. If that's all you got is memories, it's a pretty shifty treasure. But if you know that you've done good in this lifetime, the sense of self-esteem, the sense of self-worth that comes with that, keeps the mind from falling down. So it's good to take karma as a working hypothesis, because it helps you create the conditions for living well and dying well. with a sense of your own worth, a sense of well-being inside, a sense of solidity inside, which is a kind of pleasure, a kind of happiness. It's very different from the happiness that comes simply from consuming things, consuming experiences, consuming feelings. So learn to use the teaching on karma, get a good relationship to it, so you can use it wisely, thinking about the long term, not just what emotion comes up inside. You have to learn to look at your emotions. When you act on this kind of emotion, where does it lead you? When you act on that one, where does it lead you? Do they lead you to where you want to go? Because we're not just sitting here in the present moment. The present moment is moving toward the future. So you want to move in a good direction, and you have it within your power to do that. That's what the doctrine of karma teaches. So learn how to relate to it well.